Well, thank all of you for coming out. Some faces I recall from the opening of my exhibition, Shadow of Contemplation, and also from my visit to Atlantic City High School yesterday. We had a fire drill in the middle of the presentation, so it was really a live experience. What we're going to try to do today, and we're going to try to compress a lot of information into a short period of time, is to introduce some printmaking techniques to you that you can use in your studio, and we call it kitchen sink techniques, things that you can do without buying a lot of professional materials. Things you can do with your students that are non-toxic, but allows them to express images or thoughts or their own personal narratives through the work. And then we're going to, in the second half, Marianne is going to guide you through both the printmaking part at the beginning and in the second half, which will be building containers or book arts, introduction to book arts. She's a specialist in both areas and has done a lot of workshops with us at EPI, both at EPI and also internationally in Mexico, Costa Rica, and other places where we've tried to start book arts and bookmaking as a creative initiative. I think probably at the foundation of establishing EPI and even engaging in this kind of practice, why printmaking, it's a communal act. My teacher was Robert Blackburn, probably the most famous printmaking teacher in printmaking history in the U.S., in New York City, and he had a saying that everyone has a log to bring to the pile. Everyone has something important to contribute. And for me, printmaking allows diverse people, diverse personalities and cultures to engage in one objective, to create new works of art and to share that. And that knowledge is transferred all the time because all of us have something special, a genius to bring to the table. And some of that knowledge is not knowledge that is verbal or in text form, but in life experience. So this is why printmaking is so important to me, the communal act, the shared act, and the idea that you create something that is more with the collaboration of others than you would create on your own, that is larger and more richer in many different ways. Robert Rauschenberg, I know many of you are aware of Robert Rauschenberg's work and importance, said that the printmaking process for him allowed him to create images that otherwise he would not have created on his own. So it's that communal and shared experience. So we're going to show you a short film about the creation of the longest print ever made. This was created in 2006 on the 10th year anniversary of EPI. We invited a group of students, children, members of the community, about 80 people participated. We brought in 3 artists from Mexico who have specialized in these long prints that were printed with heavy-duty roller equipment, trucks, and I mean, it was really quite an experience. And I contacted Tyvek Company. You see the installation by Tyvek. I call it Tyvek, which is located in Ohio. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. Tyvek is in Strongsville. I called him and said, well, you know, I'm a hometown boy made good. You need to help me out. Can you send me 2,000 feet of Tyvek without your logo on it? And they did. They said, as long as you promote it as a Tyvek product later on. So we had to put on rollers, and we printed all across the campus. And we had, CNN was coming in, but was diverted because of a storm. We had applied to Guinness Book of Records, the longest print in history. You're going to get a chance to see this. But the important part, it was a communal effort with children, students, and local artists. So if we can start, and then we'll talk about other aspects of the print workshop and printing processes, then we'll get right to work, all right? Thank you. What we were doing is we decided to create plates out of styrofoam sheets, installation. What that allowed us to do was to use hot glue guns, attach raised areas to the surface, and then also use a paintbrush with regular turpentine that would corrode instantly the surface of the styrofoam, creating this sort of valley, so when you print it, you had a relief kind of printing quality. So it allowed them to create different textures and, of course, collage elements on top as well. And it's very transportable, very inexpensive. So this is inside the workshop. You can see this young lady, young student here carrying work. Her job was to run the plates back and forth with her sister.
What kind of foam is that?
It's a installation foam, a styrofoam, but it's compressed. They use it for installation in homes. Yeah, blue board. These are two students from Kutztown University. This is a former student of mine who just received their PhD in Madrid, Spain. This is a technical support person from the college recording it. Jace Clark is our master printmaker now, but when he came, he was a student. He's been with us for 9 years. This is Mario and Lee Muff from Mexico City, who are guiding the large printing process. And we use large paint brushes and rollers. We would roll the ink on, and we put a retardant in the ink so the ink wouldn't dry very fast, but it was acrylic-based ink, water-soluble. We'd roll it on, then place the plates on another surface with the tie back on top, and then use a steamroller going over the press. And then the kids would run back, pull the plates out, run down about 50 feet, re-ink again, and set them down, and we would just go on and on. So we had about 50 different plates that have to be recycled through the process, and just kept going.
And they didn't get squashed by the steamroller?
No, 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 it was sturdy enough. And the new president of Lafayette happened to be on site, so he came in with his children and had pizza for everybody and participated. So it was very much a communal act. And then we cut the sections up later to be sold to benefit the workshop, after displaying it in the atrium of the art center. Someone did a portrait of me, interesting. I didn't see that until later. I didn't know that was there. But you can see how children, parents.
How did they make the dents in the foam? What was it they used?
Well, they used just a plain old turpentine, because you would just brush it on and it would dissolve the surface. Turpentine would dissolve, eat away the surface of the styrofoam. So it was like doing an etching, a etching plate. And of course you could build on the top, but of course you could also cut. We had little cutters that would cut also, huh?
The last roll.
And I get to do the last row. So again, the point is that it doesn't take a lot. What it takes is imagination and energy and investment. Not really a lot of resources, financial or material resources, just creativity and a possibility. And everyone enjoys the process, and it is a communal act, a shared act, which is what printmaking to me is about. It's the most democratic form of art making that exists, because it's based on the principle of not only engagement with others, but also the sharing of the print. Why create multiples, right? Create more than one. I explained to the students yesterday, if they had one piece of artwork that was available for $50, could they purchase it right now? And of course they couldn't, they didn't raise their hands. But if it was 100 copies at $5 a piece, could they buy it? Then the question is about whether it was an original, because it was a print. And we talked about the original fine print, where the plate is all executed by hand and is signed by an artist and graphite to be archival. The paper is 100% cotton fiber archival. So it's about the quality of the process. But paper making is something that's really wonderful. We do this as well on a limited basis at the shop. That in itself is a wonderful process. Have any of you had a chance to make paper? So yeah, it's a wonderful process. But we work with a paper mill in Ohio that makes sheets for us 32 inches by 40. That takes 2 guys to pull the sheets, maybe 10 sheets a day, because it's so, the vat is so large and the blenders. But it's a phenomenal idea. I was sitting at a dinner with the president of Lafayette, and we were talking about paper with one of our donors who had been supportive of a paper mill in New York City, Dudonay paper. And he was saying, well, what's the big deal about paper? You know, you just write on it, you print on, you just send a letter. I mean, why is paper so important? And we're both alarmed by him saying this. Well, it was the first art form. Do you know how old and ancient the process of paper making is? You know, this is a learned man. What are you talking about? But anyway, so it's not just the print itself, it's also a process. So I'm going to show you a couple samples. This is a image that is created by William T. Williams, a very famous painter in New York City. And it's a image that is building. Every time he makes a print, he builds it into another image and adds an element to it. So it's not just a singular element. The reason I'm showing you this is that students don't have to make one element, they can turn it upside down, they can put multiple prints, they can keep building. Let me just show you the first one. So it's the same image inside, the same image is used. Shift it. The background image is even the image in reverse, a negative rather than a positive. Other elements added. And there are many ways you can add it. Actually, this element is added by taking a toothbrush, dipping it in a ink, and spritzing it over a sheet of acetate, and then shooting it. When I mean shooting it through a image machine, which is a process of having a screen coated with emotion that's light sensitive. You know, shapes of color added. Changes the image completely. And this artist, when he came to the workshop, said, well, Curlee, how many prints can I make? I says, well, you know, we normally only make a small edition of about 50. He says, how many? No, you misunderstand me. How many different prints can I make? So he is that kind of artist, where we have other artists like Faith Ringo. Many of you are familiar with Faith Ringo. I've been printing her work for almost 20 years, and she'll make a singular image and then make another singular image. So it depends on the artist and the personality. So that's one process. This is another where a drawing is transferred into an etching plate. And you can feel the texture. That's a deeply bitten etch. And what it is, a zinc plate dropped in a bath of nitric acid mixed with water. And what you've done is taken that zinc plate, covered it with a varnish, and then drew on it with a stylus, breaking that seal of the varnish, dropping in acid, and then it corrodes in those areas that have been broken. Then you make a plate to create color. So this is each color is a separate plate that is produced. Very labor intensive. So we did an additional 100. 4 different plates meant we did 400 pulls. And each plate is positioned on the press in the exact location. Now, I learned a trick in Oaxaca, Mexico, where I studied. They would take a needle, put a hole inside the paper, a very tiny hole, but also have a corresponding hole in the plate that you couldn't see, very little, and lay the paper on and then use the pen to guide it to the hole and register that way. That's registering blind. So there are many different ways to do it. Of course, putting markers on the press and alignment, but I do it a little differently. Building again, other colors, with notations by the artist. So the artist would make notations, then we would make modifications for the final print. So it takes a long time, a long process to complete the final etching. We also do some digital. This is a print that's both digital and serigraph. And this shows you some of the separations. And you see the registration marks there in the screen, so every time you lay the screen down, you position it to the target, and you know you're registering. So each color is separated. So the attractive thing about printmaking, I love it, as a metaphor for many other things in life, is close scrutiny, detail-oriented. And I teach my students that. It's not what someone, listen closely to what someone's saying and ask why they're saying it. So it translates in every aspect of life. And also you're deconstructing, you're reversing everything. You're not only reversing the direction, you're taking the image all the way back to its skeleton and building it again. So you're deconstructing everything and reconstructing, which I think is a dynamic experience because it causes you to think more deeply about what you're doing with greater detail, greater scrutiny. And I think we all need to do that. So, here's a little information. I'm going to let you come up as we walk out and go into the gallery. A little information about EPI on its 10th year anniversary and a recent article about EPI called The Jewel in the Garage. We are in a garage. And I remember a meeting with the president, and one of our professors said, you know, he was complaining about the Arts Center, which had this fantastic, beautiful building. He says, you have a second-rate team on a beautiful field or building. You have a first-rate team in a garage. Why is that? The garage doesn't matter. It's what you do in the space that matters, right? All right, so why don't you guys come up, take a little look if you like to, and then we'll go into the gallery. This is a piece, this was commissioned by the Allentown Art Museum as a series, and it's called Organic Portals. And the thinking behind it was that we always have to look through some rationale, some way of thinking to approach whatever we're approaching, and those realities do change. And this is about a range of people, and these are image photographs that I turn into transparencies, overlays through the computer, and then use them to make screens and build them. My hands, shots from me and traveling to Japan and different countries. But it's this whole ideal of linking humanity together in different experiences, different cultures, but really compressing that into one reality, one shared reality about these portals, organic portals, these ways in which we believe things, practice things, and approach things, right? So this is, again, seriograph, but constantly building on the surface. So the first color was yellow, a block of yellow. And then I print orange on that, and you're always going from light to dark. For registration purposes, and also the darker, as the colors get darker, they can correct your mistakes by laying the color on top of a mistake. But if it's printing from dark to light, you can't do it. And you know, the dark colors undermine the fidelity of the light colors, and they turn them all kinds of different shades. So it's always building from light to dark. This is a print called Cycle of Life, and I've done a lot of series of, in my work of self-portraits because I want to document my own demise, so to speak. I want to have a record so that my children, grandchildren can see who he was and as he went through these transitions. And I don't think of that as a negative thing. So there's 4 aspects to it. The genesis, coming into life, being born, passions of that life, organic passions, the bright red, and how it gets even a darker red, how we are making decisions, very passionate, very sort of driven in our ambitions, and then it moves into the stars, which are the sort of the twilight in the cosmos. And it's called Cycles of Life, so you can see this using my portrait as this sort of symbol and structure as I go through this. So my work is always reflective. All of my work is about thinking about me, the world I'm in, my family, my reality, and I'm attempting to document it. I was talking to a very famous artist recently, and we were talking about our body of work. And she asked me what was my project, what was my motivation. I told my motivation was to leave a record that my family, my grandchildren, descendants can actually look at and say, that's what Grandpa thought. That's what Grandpa felt. That was his principle. That was his ethics. That was his practice, his values. I think that's important to leave. And there are many different ways to leave it. I decided to leave it in this work, and if I'm fortunate, my particular conversation can have some larger implications, larger universal connections. So sometimes I'm doing some body of work. I'm gonna give you a perfect example. I did my master's thesis about this idea of space and place. This notion that we're defined by our uniforms, by our work, by the place we inhabit, by the space we inhabit. I went into a government building to get some license renewed, and there was a handwritten sign on the wall behind the counter saying, no swearing in this building. It was written by a magic marker. Now, first of all, I was disturbed that I had to come into the building and deal with a lot of rules that are imposed on me by the government. I can manage that. We all manage that. But for an individual to throw another set of rules on me, I started cussing because she did this. You cannot do this. You know, maybe collectively as a government entity, we got to deal with it, but you're not going to give me another set of rules, you know. And I thought about this. I thought my father, as a young man, worked in the slaughterhouse, and he used to go through a door called the kill door, and their uniforms would change. I thought about Upton St. Clair's famous book, you know. So my point is that we get defined by it, and it defines us, we define it, and that is about this idea of space and place. Well, I did this series, and I had a figure in a vessel, contorted human. A young woman tracked me down on the campus that day and asked me, had I ever been abused as a child? I says, no. She says, well, your work is about this confinement. I'm thinking this is existential and philosophical. This is not personal. She said her father was a minister and used to punish her by putting her under the sink in the kitchen. Now, My point is that I'm talking about something else. But for her, it gave her an opportunity to say, this somehow talks to me about something I've dealt with. That was a little disturbing, and I wasn't ready to manage anything like that. But my point is that my particular conversation can also speak to someone else about their life or their reality, and that's a valuable thing. That's not the primary motive, but that is something that has happened through my work, and I think we can all do it. It goes back to what I said about the log on the pile. We all have a genius to bring to the table. The question is whether we reveal it, and I tell my students all the time, and it's not my story I want you to tell. Don't paint like me, don't make art like me. Tell your story, because that's the thing that you have, the greatest gift that you have, and the unique thing that you can offer the world is your story. So I think telling kids this and teaching kids this, enabling them to tell their story is critical. Another print today. So I collaborated with a Shakespearean scholar, Ian Smith, who much of his work is writing about Othello in a contemporary manner, how Othello and Shakespeare's work reflects everyday life. And he explains that he was well aware, Shakespeare was well aware of this Othello personality, who was an ambassador, was built on this character, this ambassador from Granada to the Spanish Empire. Granada was a Muslim state within Spain for a long time. And this was this great ambassador that everyone knew about that did business with the Queen of England and Vienna, and he built the story on this. But it was about this individual dealing with coming into a different world, a foreign world, and finding a way. And of course, he marries this nobleman's daughter, Desdemona, sweet Desdemona, one kiss before death. But anyway, if you should read the story. I mean, it's a great story anyway. But anyway, Ian Smith really brings to life the context of Shakespeare, that these were unemployed actors. They were on the margins of society, as well as Shakespeare was himself. They drank a great deal. Actors were impoverished. They were outsiders of society, writing to move into society. So Othello was really a metaphor for Shakespeare and others' effort to be a part of society. So I reimagined Othello in sepia, but I gave him a different kind of personality. He's talking to Desdemona. He's removed his cultural mask, and he's asked her to remove hers, but she refuses to. In this one, he is entertaining Desdemona. So it's about affection, about romance, about love, not just tragedy. And you see it with Othello here, and then the betrayal behind her, the hand on the back of her conspiring, but it's about the Moor coming into that environment. So I use etching to do this, and it's a portfolio of 40 in addition, and we placed the portfolios in different institutions with a small book that was made to go along with it. So let me take you to print on the other side. And I did this in a way so I could have the embossed area. I used Dremel tools, drills to cut this line, this lightning. This is called God Don't Like Ugly. When I was a kid, the older women in the community would say, if you did something bad, you were a mannish little boy, they would say, God don't like ugly, you know? And that always stayed with me. A lot of those things sort of stayed with me. But you see these two individuals fighting and battling, and God is interrupting with the lightning, that God does not like ugly. That's what this piece is about. And finally, this is called blind spots. I did a lot of work in Japan, and one thing that I experienced in Japan was this. If any of you have been to Japan, it's in many ways a very closed society. You know, it has a lot of rules. It has this Japan that they show the foreigner, the outsider, and then it has the Japan that is very much traditional, very controlling, and private. You know, I know Americans that have been there for a decade and have never been invited to the homes of their friends. You don't bring them to your home. Your home is extremely private. So there are multiple Japanese cultures, practices in their culture and privacy. So I thought about this idea of blind spots. You know, when you see the light gets in your eye and you can't quite see clearly. And I did this series based on the notion that they couldn't see me. Because the way in which they operated with me, although I was a professor and an artist, was with a great deal of stereotypes that they had seen on television. Not me, but what they thought I was. And I was doing the same thing. These were blind spots. So I did a series of work about these, and you'll have images, and then I want you to have a color that is in the way to prevent you from seeing clearly. So the goal is to see each of us ourselves more clearly, in greater detail, and greater compassion and understanding. I've been reading a book by Audrey Flack, who's an artist, and she says in her book that, remember, every time you meet someone, no matter who it is, they are dealing with a major struggle in their lives, always. There's a saying in the temple, Jewish temple, when you look at the person next to you, you're looking in the eyes of God. And if we did that, there'd be a lot less pain, a lot less violence, because how could you harm God if you're looking at God? All right, let's go make some artwork.
So I have 2 plates here, actually. You're going to build this one first using just mat board, cardboard, and so on. Another way to make a plate like this is just take a piece of mat board, put gesso on it, or acrylic paint, anything that will dry hard, Elmer's glue, and just create a texture. And then you get a texture you can build on. And this can be a background for something. Right now there's a show at the Rosenfeld Gallery on Arch Street in Philadelphia, and it's monotypes. And the woman has done a really wonderful tour de force monotypes, landscapes. And she has taken each section of her landscape and turned it into a little plate. She's made a plate out of board, coated with gesso, and a texture, so that the roof of the house is one plate. The trunk of the tree is one plate. The walkway in front is one plate. And so you get the idea. So she has built this print just by using textures. I don't remember her name, and I just happen to think of it right now. But it's at the Rosenfeld on Arch Street. Yeah. And I think it'll be there for a while. My point is that you can use a very simple surface to get all kinds of textures that can become a very rich kind of print. So the first thing, this is the print that came from this simple plate. You know it's mirror image. Printmaking is always mirror image unless you're doing a planographic surface. And this is called the ghost. This is pulled off the plate with the excess ink. And sometimes the ghost has a good use. You might build a different kind of print on this part. The one thing I would recommend with this that you do is that you build a frame around the outer edges. And the reason for that is so the brayer will ride on that. If you don't have a frame around it, the brayer will go down into your background, depending on the size of the brayer. All of these variables will change things for you. So, so build the frame. I think I'm going to use this. This is a little bit stronger. This is obvious. The reason we're going to do this first is because it has to dry before we can use it as a plate. You probably can get away with just making a frame on the sides and fitting it together. Cut this as you need to. I'm going very low concept here.
Everyone understands why she's doing this, right?
Mm-hmm. And you can cut these with an X-Acto knife if you have a board to cut on. And then simply And it's up to you up to you and how much time you have as to how detailed you want to get. If you get into very small pieces like that on the end, these things will come up more easily. So you want to try and, that would be a limitation of what you can do, because the brayer can get caught on that. So I'm not going to go on too far with this, because we'll go on to the next thing. All right, so very, very simple kind of, just a, you know, the real learning in this comes in your practice, of course. You know, you leave the workshop, you tried it once, you made some notes. So if you're interested in actually practicing it, you will get better at it, and your expression then will become part of it.
And keep in mind, you can, as a material, you can use cloth, low sort of type metal, coins. You can attach a number of things to the surface, create a relief plate,
Yes.
or what we call a holograph, collage of surfaces.
Yes, and
Burlap, all kinds of material can be used. Lace to create special kind of images, and then also you can cut those into figurative forms, silhouettes and portraits. So it's not just an abstract, simplistic process. It can be very elaborate.
no.
And of course, the scale can shift too. It can be very large as well.
And it takes a lot of time to build a plate like that. I've done plates, holograph plates. This is just a relief. The holograph actually has more than one level on it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you almost have to paint on it. I used to take a foam brush and have them paint instead of using a roller, because we had different levels.
Yes, and it becomes, when you put more than one level, it becomes a viscosity print, which means that you have to use different viscosities of inks. Some ink is looser than others. You use a tight ink for the top layer. So you start with a very viscous ink that has a lot of oil in it. It goes down into the lower levels, and then you roll with a less viscous ink, and that will go in like the mid levels, and then a real tight ink for the very top. And I can't tell you what a long learning curve that was for me to do that. I must have pulled 25 of those.
Each different viscous is
Yes.
the vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
is a roller that is of a different art.
That's right. You
So
need a
soft
different roller.
that is with the wet ink is going to drive it down into the deeper areas. A stiffer roller, stiffer ink is going to sit on top of that, and they won't mix.
Yeah.
You can put 20 colors on there, and they will not mix, as long as you keep the viscous separate.
That's right. And it's all on there, one after the other.
Yeah, they just load up.
You know, it's just, and you pull it once. And so you partner with that oil in the ink, and you get a random quality about it, and finally you get the right viscosity and the right density of the roller, and you can replicate it. So it's quite a process. So, but yes, you would, and when you use fabric and all of that, you're going to have lots of levels, and it's surprising what comes of that. It's very beautiful and very rich. So, but this is like the very beginning of that kind of process. And then the very best thing to do with this, if you want to keep this as a plate, is to coat it with some kind of fixative or an acrylic sealer, you know. So you actually could wipe it off and clean the ink off of it. We're not going to do that today, because that's another drawing time. Any questions about this? Pretty simple. Have any of you done this before? Probably some of you have done it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you're going to gather, you need one of these. You need some cardboard to cut. The one thing you need to be sure of is that whatever material you use for the relief to glue on here, you use all the same material. Otherwise, you'll be making a holograph. What you're going to do is to get your ink before you start. You're going to walk back there into the creation station and dole yourself out some ink like this. I'm not sure we have a container like this for every single person, but that's not really necessary. 2 of you can share the ink, and so you need at least this much, a little more for 2 people. You'd be surprised how far this ink goes. So, and there are also plexi plates back there that you can share, and brayers. So when you go back, you need to get your ink, a plate, and a brayer. And you may need to share between 2 of you. And you will have paper to use for this. Here, where it says collagraphs, I'll put it this way. And the collagraphs is for when you print this. Actually, what I want to do before we print this collagraph is to show you a couple of really simple methods that can become complex. See if I can squeeze them in now. When you lay out the ink, just put a line of it across the top of the plate. And this plate, I use this plate a lot in my own studio, and you need to tape it down because it will move. Unless it's got some kind of surface on the edge. Some of those plates have tape around the edges, and that might be enough friction to keep them in place. But you need to have this well in place because otherwise it'll move around. So you want to start rolling out the ink. Just take it from the bottom of that line. Don't take all of it. Some of the brayers have soft spots in them or indentations, and you'll see that show up right away on the rolling surface. You know your ink is right when you hear this tacky sound. It's like a hiss. And that's good. So the first thing I want to show you is a simple thing called a trace monotype. And this is just using a piece of paper as a plate. Where's that newspaper? We have newspaper here. Ah, thanks. Thank you so much. And you'll be using the newspaper too. So I'm going to roll out the ink right onto this piece of paper. And you can already see what's going on with my roller, and if I lifted it a little bit. You can take the back of a paintbrush, you can take a pencil, not the point, but if it's a dull point, you can use it. But I like to use the back of a paintbrush. Just put down a piece of paper right on here. And then just simply trace on the back of it. That tells me I probably need to put a little more ink. The ink's a little dry, but you can see you can get just line this way. It's just very, very easy. If you put too much ink, you know what will happen. You'll get darkness all around it. But so the practice means that you learn to replicate how much ink you put on there and so on. So you understand that process. So you're going to try that.
I have a question.
No.
bare spots, no.
I wouldn't know that necessarily. I wanted to try and just get line, so I was willing to try it and see. Now I would roll it on there. It's a matter of just learning. You know, this paper absorbs some ink. I may have taken off some ink from my brayer when I went too many times, because you can remove the ink from the brayer too by rolling it. Okay, so that's one thing. We also have these little soft foam plates. When I was teaching art in the public school, everybody would collect meat trays. And we would use them. They were actually thicker than these. It was good. So we have those here. So this is, by the way, was a planographic process, right? It almost becomes an intaglio, but not quite. When we use the soft foam, that becomes more like an intaglio, because we're going below the surface. We're sort of incising below the surface. And that I do like to use a pencil. See what gets picked up. And you know, even though I'm just making sort of what seems to be random marks, there's an expression there that is me. No matter what you do, it's still a self-expression. You may modify it, you may refine it, but it's your mark. So this actually becomes sort of a reverse intaglio. Now, I can pick up this ink with my hand. I can use a little squeegee like this. These I just buy at the auto parts store. They're to apply Bondo, you know, body fillers. You get 3 in a package. Or you can buy the expensive ones from Dick Blick.
You can also use a clean roller.
Yes, you can use a brayer. So, see, now I have some texture. I have some darker lines where the ink went down in, and I have the lighter lines where it did not replicate an intaglio. I want to do that again because I want to use my my walk spoon. And you may notice when you're rolling that your brayer picks up this design. And you may transfer it to another piece of paper like that.
You have some printmakers that what they do is they create a plate. They'll roll over that plate with the ink and use the image on the roller, the brayer, and transfer that to a sheet of paper.
Exactly.
The image that is now on the brayer itself.
So this is my walk spoon that I use all the time to make contact, and it has a nice smooth spot on it. And I've used this for woodcuts, I've used it for a lot of things. But, and of course the trick is to make sure you make contact with that spot. But there are so many ways that you can use to get that ink transferred. You know, so you get the idea that look around your environment, see what you have, and don't hesitate to use any surface, you know, or any kind of tool that you think might work. Just
so you notice that, Marianne, as the colors, the ink is getting a little darker, you have to build up consistency of ink. And we call those proofs. We do the first print to get a sense of reading of the image, and that's an artist's proof. You get the consistency of ink on the surface to but again, it takes a level of building the surface of the ink, so they transfer.
That's right. So they're all proofs. And when you get one you think you can replicate, then you actually have an artist proof, and then it's called, when you know it's right, it's a bon de tirer, good to pull. And that's sometimes takes quite a while to get there. I learned that from him. Okay, so that's those easy processes that seem very simple, but you can see how it could become. You have kids who like to draw. These kinds of processes are great for them. Especially kids who like to draw quickly, you know, and they'll do a sketch and so on. Okay, so I'm going to ink this one, and because I don't want to stop you to show you how to do this. So when you go back, you're going to try 3 things. You're going to try the trace monotype, just 2 pieces of paper, right? You're going to ink up a piece of paper, lay a clean one down on top of it, use the back of a paintbrush, pull it. Then you're going to use the soft foam, draw into it with a pencil, put the clean piece of paper on it, contact, print that one. Then you're going to do this. Your plate is ready. I have my especially ugly plate here that I will print. So, not nearly enough ink. I can tell that just by looking at that. And you know, of course, it's a paper
It's about pressure
plate.
as well, not just the ink, but the pressure you apply to it.
Yeah, and this newspaper's held the brayer up off the end of it. And the plate, of course, is absorbing this ink. And if you seal it, that won't happen so easily. I have a collagraph plate that I've kept because I think the plate is nicer than the print sometimes. But it's sealed and it's made of fabric, but it's just loaded with sealer. Okay, so we'll see what happens here. I'm not bothering to register these in particular, but I can teach you some registration techniques.
You can take smaller brayers, they have brayers that are very tiny, 1/4 inch wide, and you can ink a different color on a different section of that plate, print it, remove that. You know, you can actually stick pins to the corner or edge of that paper and then flip it over, have registration marks for the plate, put another set of ink on, put it back in that position, drop the sheet back over, and add additional color.
When you have this frame on here, even if it's just on the 2 sides, you can go around that first so you know where your outline is, and then go within that, so you're not picking up neat ink from your newspaper unnecessarily, although, you know, we don't usually put newspaper under this. It's usually on a surface like plexi or something where it's not going to come up near the print. Whoa! That actually printed pretty well. Yeah. So I got enough ink on there, and I had enough contact pressure.
You want to also play with that a little bit. You can flip that plate over on the other side, ink it up, for example, with a yellow.
Yes.
Print 10 of them, flip it back over, do your inking on the other side where the image is, and drop it right on top of the yellow. So now you have a color in the background, not just white in the paper. so many ways you can play.
That's right. Now you make me want to do it again. Okay, and I won't do it. So we didn't give you color today because it's just another variable that you would have to try and control and decide about. You know, this is about cause and effect. This workshop is kind of named cause and effect. I haven't mentioned that until now. But you can see that everything you do, every cause you make, has an effect. And in printmaking, that's especially clear. When I was working in public school, I taught art for 8 years, and then I taught reading after that at upper grades, 7th and 8th grades. So I was very much involved in teaching higher level thinking skills, the higher order thinking skills. We used to call them the HOTS. We remember that for some reason. And I always think about that when I'm teaching, because you want to move the children, or anybody you're teaching, from their literal level of skills into the higher order thinking skills. Cause and effect is one of those interpretive skills that they don't only use in reading, but they can apply it, and they can have it reinforced by working in the arts, and printmaking in particular, because you can see it immediately. You do this, that happens. You make this mark, you're going to get that effect. So, and there's a sequence. And we know some of our kids, our students, are sequential thinkers. You know about this matrix of the philosophy of education, psychology of education, where some people are sequential thinkers, some people are abstract thinkers, some are abstract sequential, and so on. Some are concrete. So you can move people from concrete thinking into some abstract thinking, from sequential into not so sequential by using these techniques. You don't tell them you're doing that, but they can learn to do that kind of different thinking. Artists do it a lot. They don't call it that. So, okay, so you're going to do 3 things. And you know to go back there, get your materials, ask if you don't see what you need. There are these sticks to dole out the ink, and then you'll need another stick to take it from your container onto your plexi. Okay, so go right ahead, get what you need. By serigraph, screen printing. You'll see in your glossary the word serigraph is also known as screen printing. And what it means is you have a frame and you stretch. Used to be silk, now it's polyester that I buy at Walmart or any other fabric store. This happens to be sheer curtains. This is an old discarded picture frame, and I have stretched the fabric and stapled it all around, just like you would stretch a canvas. And then taped it with sealing tape. You can use duct tape, but some of the duct tape that's out there now does not stick well, does not hold up against the wetness that happens with this kind of printing. This is another planographic form of printing, so it's flat. These are just some pieces that were ones that didn't end up as final prints, but these are layered serigraphs. My work is larger than this, but I bring these small pieces along, and you can see that every color has a screen to it. And sometimes what I'll do these with stencils. I gotta tear the stencil and put it here. I use paper like this, and then just print it. Where's my, this. Print it like that, you force the ink through. So you can see this was sort of a series. Sometimes I'll take that stencil paper and peel it off the back of that because there's ink on it and apply it to the print. And it creates a different kind of a form. So that's called chine-collé. That's when it becomes part of the print itself, but it's like collage, but it's stuck on there. And the classic form of doing that is to put it on in prints like etchings, and you run them through the press, and that sticks during that time when it goes through the press. And these are simple little, these are just shapes that came through the screen. Sometimes you get these and they seem very beautiful to you, and then you can try to replicate these when you go into your other, in your regular work. That's what I do with my regular work. So this one is far from anything complete. What I've done with this screen is to block it, and you can buy screen block. This is Elmer's glue. And what I did with this was just put this down on a piece of parchment paper that you get, like freezer paper, that has a shiny surface on one side. You put that down on the shiny side and just put this on it and let it dry there. When it will go through slightly and go into that parchment, you want this to be flat on the bottom. You don't want a lot of little nubs sticking out there because that will interfere with the passage of the ink. You need to use a different kind of ink than what we just used to do the block printing. You need to use an acrylic, a water-soluble ink that then dries hard, but can be washed out of the screen. So it's the same business. I'm just pulling that down. I have a regular squeegee that's wide that I use. Depends on how much of the screen I'm actually employing. I have a very large screen that has hinges on it. That is a typical professional screen, and I have that in my studio. But I employ a lot of these little screens that so that I can play with it. So you see what happened with that? And that, wherever I put that Elmer's glue, the image is blocked. The ink is blocked. So you have to think about where could I use that? How can I employ that? I want to put this down on top of here too. I have a lot of extender in this ink, which means it's thinned out considerably. So I'm going to just try and move some of this over. I'm just curious. I don't want it all over. I just want to fool around with it a little bit and use up that ink. Okay. So I got something on there. It gives me something else now to layer on. I'm going to strip this immediately, which means the newspaper. Okay. It means I'm going to take a piece of paper, lay it down on top of it, and strip the extra ink off, because I don't want all that ink on there. I'm using Reeves printmaking paper. It's really very, very nice to use. It's like the classic printmaking paper. Okay, so I'm going to strip this. Use my wok spoon. Or you can use a scraper, the squeegee. I want to take a lot of it off. You see, the idea is to make that layer thin and to get it so that I have not affected every single part. Now, that makes a difference. That doesn't mean I like it, but I see what happens, you know, when you do that. So I might.
A certain kind of visual vocabulary.
Yes, that's right. And this is my vocabulary for now. I deal a lot with abstract images that have to do with medicine, illness, chemistry, science. So a lot of my prints are bought by the Allergan Corporation for their offices, and because they have a relevance to their products and to why they are. I'm telling you about this because somebody asked. This is a surface that you can make it into a plate. It's like wood that you make a woodcut in, but it's called Sintra, S-I-N-T-R-A. They have a website. You can Google Sintra and find it. It's a composite. It's like a resin of some kind, and it cuts beautifully. It's so easy. It's easy for me to cut into. This is. Oh yeah. Your tools have to be sharp, but still. But this is the printing it twice, 2 different colors on white paper. You can print it on, I like to print it on Japanese paper, moriki paper that has beautiful color. And you get just gorgeous effects.
What do you cut it with?
Pardon me?
What do you cut it with?
Woodcut tools. The man who told me about this Sintra stuff, he actually worked with John Ross, who is, and I went to school with him, with the guy who told me about this. John Ross, who wrote this book. This is a great book. It's in your notes. There's a section on school printing. So that's about it for now. There are, if you see other things in the plan for this morning and you're curious about it, the pochoir, which is spelled P-O-C-H-O-I-R. It looks like po choir. Ask me about it and I'll describe it to you. But you have worked so hard, and I just appreciate so much, first of all, your lives as teachers. Because in my estimation, there is no nobler calling, and I believe that everybody in this country should do national service as a teacher's aide in the public schools to see really what you have to do, because it is quite something. So you have my total admiration, and I'm so happy that you came here today.